Bhagavad Gita then use the Motilal of Page note cards as an example to show that Bhagavad group and Bhagavad people have been worshiping Bhagavad like wildfire, and so then they expel these sadhus immediately. The group of sadhus then they eventually make their way to Bhagavad, staying at the Bhadrad Mandir initially, and then when Bhagavad actually finally locates them, he initially scolds them for being shameless and not considering the reputations, but even despite that, he integrate some of the learned sadhus like Raghuvirji Maharaj into some of the local mandir activities. Then there's this entire conversation where Raghuvirji Swami asks the sadhus about their view of Bhagaji, and they declare him to be a Paramekantha, so without any doubt. And so then Bhagaji tells him to always be happy, and you have found the Satpurusha, so why worry? And so these two sadhus got immense bliss and happiness from Bhagaji's darshan. Even the local mandir sadhus were actually deeply impressed by their godly behavior and character. Then young Dashi does a reading from Bhagavad Gita and comes across this verse around worshiping the worshiper of God rather than God himself directly. And so Bhagavad elaborates upon these passages, explains that how God always remains near his devotee and even worships the devotee from within. And so then he realizes that God's staying hidden while blessing the devotee is one of his own greatest virtues. And then in a packed assembly at the Moa Mandir, devotees question the excommunicate sadhus that what have you seen this Bhagaji? And so that is when Yajna comes and firmly declares the Satguru's qualities and how Bhagaji is meet and exceeds all of these different qualities of the Satgurus that has. And Purushottam Swami experienced very disturbing instincts during deep meditation. There is distress. And when he awakens, he finds Bhagaji sitting right opposite him. He smiles. He knows his struggle. He knows how deeply frustrated he is. And he assures him that his fruits will ripe and his unripe fruit will become sweet. And he reveals this knowledge of Purushottam Swami's inner troubles and provides him with a sense of peace. Then Bhagaji prepares his devoted sadhus that he has kept in the local mandir. Now he prepares them for departure by reading this Vajranamrita about the bliss of the Satpurush association, even when separated. And he lovingly feeds them mangoes and food and creating all these different fond memories for their departure. And then these four sadhus, they travel to all of these other different places, including Varta, but reunion attempts fail because conditions are requiring them to wear white garments. Right, white garments, not saffron garments, but white garments. And so Bhagaji's loyal devotees are displeased with this unfair treatment. Why do we have to wear white garments? However, this reunion is still postponed, but Vignandas, he still remains happy because he would still want to maintain association with Bhagaji rather than a formal acceptance into the institutional satsang. Then a group of sadhus and devotees from Gujarat, they make their way back and spend more time with Bhagaji. They want to do this. But then this Kothari attempts to prevent this meeting, and they send letters immediately instructing the devotees to be sent back immediately. And the Mohua devotees are very clever, and they circumvent this order by arranging a meeting point at Katpur, not at Mohua, at Katpur. So they are not disobeying the letter. They are not disobeying the letter, but they are finding a way around the letter to make sure that they have association with Bhagatji. And so then in Katpur, Bhagaji received these group of visiting sadhus and with obvious initial displeasure, scolding them for not following his instructions to stay away. But then after his anger subsides, after he talks to them, he then provides for their needs. He engages them into spiritual discourses, and during this time, Bhagaji actually develops infections on his toes and an illness and fingers. But Purushottam Bhadra, he serves him as the healer, and this intimate setting allows for close association between Bhagaji as well as his sadhus. There is an evening on the Aarti. Bhagaji asks for devotional singing from these different sadhus, including Muktanan, bhajans by Narsi Mehta. And so Yagnapurush Dashi recites 9 different Sanskrit verses that he composed extolling Bhagaji's praises. And so Purushottam Swami also recites the Vajramrut. And so the verses actually greatly please Bhagaji. And so there's this entire evening gathering and where all these different devotees and sadhus, they come together and they praise the virtues of Bhagaji. And so Bhagaji also does this discourse about the different Vaishnava traditions. And he explains, Yagnapurush Dasi also requests clarification about Sri Maharaj's supremacy. And so Bhagaji explains that Maharaj's supremacy and unique powers include his ability to grant samadhi through mere contact. He is supreme, the cause of all avatars. He initiated 500 Paramas in one night, and he promised to collect devotees at their deathbed. Bhagaji then he becomes very stern. He questions why these disciples refuse to stay in Varta and wear white. Why are they not abiding by these institutional commands? And so the disciples share their experience and justify their decision. They say that Kothari Vicharvala says that talking about Bhagaji is like burping after eating radish. It's involuntary. It will happen. It's inevitable. But then when Bhagaji threatens to leave them, he actually begins walking away. The devotees desperately try to follow and try to meet with him, but Jai Lal Bhai, he gets injured by a thorn in his hates, and so Bhagaji returns to him, removes the thorn, and encounters a boatman, and he explains his role as the boatman of God. He says that he is responsible, just like a boatman is responsible for steering his disciples. This boatman of God, in the form of Bhagaji, is responsible for steering his devotees and disciples on the right path. He then writes letters to Vartal and Mumbai, expressing willingness to comply with any conditions, even wearing black, to remain within satsang. And so when Jawaharlal Bhai offers to sponsor a meal, Bhagaji then says that this is not like what are we doing? We have to consider a principle of social propriety. He narrates a story of a Nagar Brahman who was excommunicated for eating in silk clothes like a kati, despite the clothes not being actually in silk. Right? He was excommunicated for eating in silk clothes, but even though they were not, so it is important for us to understand how others will perceive us. And so he explains that while serving food prepared in milk would be very pure, there would be rumors that would be spread about Bhagaji serving sweet food, and this would cause social problems. So through this teaching, Bhagaji said, let's make motichur or milk-based sweet instead, not serving food prepared with milk. Let's do a different type of sweet. Yagnapurush Dashi then requests Bhagaji life history. And so Bhagaji then narrates his entire life history. He was when he was born, he entered satsang through Yoganand Swami, then he first met Gopalanand Swami and Bhagavan Maharaj in Pitwadi. Bhagaji explains his association with Gopalanand Swami, then how he met with Gurunath Swami, how he became associated with him. He granted the three boons, guided him to spiritual perfection, and then he mentions his excommunication and readmission when Gurunath Swami went to Dham in 1867. And all of these associations with these great sadhus. One Purushottam's comments about people criticizing the sadhus modified upasana. Bhagaji rebukes him for speaking ill of enlightened souls without proper knowledge. Don't rebuke other people. There was a story of 5 Brahmins who died from a snake venom that accidentally fell into their food from a kite. Yamraja assigned the sin of these from the snake, the 5 Brahmins who died from a snake venom to an old woman. Why? Because this old woman falsely accused the almhouse owner of murder. So through this powerful story, Bhagavan teaches that false accusations carry severe karmic consequences, in the same way that old woman incurred the sin of 5 murders through her careless words. You are all from the past. Jai Velar Bhai prepare sugar laddu, and Bhagaji holds this assembly nearby, so Jai Velar Bhai can benefit from the darshan discourse, and Bhagaji discusses all of these other philosophical schools, right? Vishishtadvait, Dvait, Advait, Shuddha Advait, all these different philosophies, and he reveals to these sadhus that they are all souls from previous births. If their past forms were revealed, they would be immensely surprised and amazed at their spiritual history. Bhagaji explains that they have already eaten the tasteless balls of food during Shriji Maharaj's time and returned to earth again. The Garada sadhus finally accept Bhagaji's group, or they decide that they will accept Bhagaji's group if they wear white garments. Then there's this meeting at the river where the disciples readily agreed to these conditions. And so when they appear in white, Bhagaji spontaneously says, Varni Deshara Miya Darshanam. How charming is the darshan of these bodies in such clothes? This is divine bliss in Bhavan. So Bhagaji arranges for their accommodation. Either is this period of intense spiritual fellowship. He appoints Yagnapurush Dashi as the group's fellow leader, Yagnapurush Vignan Das to follow his commands, and he sponsors a meal and advises them not to go against Karada, and he prefers to keep them close for continued spiritual association and protection. Bhagaji then tests the disciple by suggesting they remove their renunciant garments and then return home as householders and enjoy his association without the binding constraints of sadhu life. The sadhus unanimously reject this suggestion, suggesting that they have no other alternative but to remain celibate sadhus and burn their lust through spiritual practice. They said that even householders need renunciation to perfect this vow, so they would rather remain in the sadhu fold. And so Bhagaji is very pleased at this. Even in Bhadra, the sadhus travel to Bhadra, and when provisions are sent by Bhagaji's nephew, they remain untouched for 3 days, and they fast for 3 days. And Vignanda Swami says that only when Bhagaji comes here personally will we actually eat. So Bhagaji immediately arranges a cart and travels to Bhadra at night, and he finds them singing Chesta, and he emphasizes the importance of following Shriji Maharaj's Niyam, stating that their mutual affection depends on the adherence to Dharma, and lapses in the Niyam Dharma would end their relationship. And so Bhagaji creates this entire routine of alternate day fasting and devotional singing and intense spiritual association. The experience of divine bliss, Bhagaji, despite having encountered all these different hardships and insults, He wants it to fulfill the spiritual desires of these excommunicated sadhus that live like Paramahansas. And so he creates divine incidents, he gives them supreme bliss, he teaches them and gives them immense discourses, he guides them, he establishes daily routines. And through various tests and spiritual practices, he demonstrates his role as the Ekantik Satpurusha and the eternal guide. And during the journey, Vignanda Swami steps on a thorn. And so Bhagaji prompts Natha Bhagat to remove it carefully. And he sees the size of the thorn. And so Bhagaji expresses great concern. And he says to relax Vignanda, and for him to practice doing more constant devotion to God. He says that wherever you go, he is your only support. And so this demonstrates Bhagaji's intense care. There were many different newcomers, including devoted Brahmins, who would attend Bhagaji's discourses after initially coming from Mahadev Darshan. But during when they came after his teachings and after his demonstration, restraining the senses and focusing the mind on God's form, he demonstrates these principles. He enters deep samadhi states, lasting 2 to 3 hours. Everyone witnesses these states, and so they are immensely amazed, and they admit that they had not realized the form of Bhagaji and his greatness ever since. And so they worship him, and they observe that even great sadhus have failed to maintain faith in him. He is the only one who can make others at peace. And when Vastabai visits with several people from Bhagaji's darshan, engaging in lengthy spiritual practices, Bhagaji has Yajnapurush Dashi read the Vachanamrita up to Bhagwan Swaminarayan in Loj, and then he praises each of the sadhus that are in company with him, and then he praises the sadhus that these sadhus are the one who can make others feel at peace. These are renunciant sons of respectable devotees who have left their homes through detachment, past every alternative, are yearned by many of these Gujarat devotees who seek their darshan. These sadhus are capable of giving peace to others. They can burn the sins of whoever has their darshan, encouraging daily association with them. This is something that he says to Vastabai, and he demonstrates to Vastabai along with the different people that came to visit Bhagaji with Vastabai. When collecting alms, Yajnapurush Dashi and Narayan Charan Swami, they meet a village chief. He says that they negatively comment about their situation under Bhagaji's influence, but Yajnapurush Dashi responds by explaining how Bhagaji actually taught them to remain in satsang without upsetting others, to remain content in their own bliss, to study these scriptures. Bhagaji told them to wear white, bow to everyone, remain humble. And so because of this explanation, he was impressed by it. He admits that he was given false information about Bhagaji, and he donates 5 kg of rice. And Bhagaji hears about this incident and says to always highlight your own drawbacks and speak virtues about others. Yajnapurush Dashi then reads from the Vachanamrita and Uddhav Gita, while Bhagaji teaches various tunes for their verses, swaying with devotion while listening to the gopis' great love described in the scriptures. Sadhus then recite a verse from the Kapil Gita, which Bhagaji identifies is the best verse, the principal verse from 18,000 verses. And when asked to speak, Vignanda Swami requests protection from lust, anger, and greed. Yajnapurush Dashi recites one verse about getting moksha. Bhagaji then says that speaking builds confidence and brings renewed joy each time. During the divine discourse, Bhagaji says that I will not leave any deficiencies within you. He reveals the previous birth of various Paramahansas, mentions about Swarupanand Swami. He mentions that he was an Akshar Mukt, makes a profound promise to them to take them to Akshardham. And if he is not able to do so before they perfect Ekantik Dharma, then he will take them to another universe where mothers are incarnated, and he will finally have them get rid of all of their deficiencies. There is this intimate gathering. Bhagaji asked Beshar Bhagat to sing bhajans, including Lagari Te Preet. And Yajnapurush Dashi sings devotional songs, including Why Don't You Take the Heat of My Pinning? This moves Bhagaji to laughter. There's this grand meal of rotlash and shah as well, where butter rotlas, buttermilk, spinach are created. Bhagaji challenges them to eat these with the same equanimity that they show while eating dudhpa. And he ensures every sadhu receives multiple rotlas, playfully interacts with them, scolds Vignanda Swami for finding the buttermilk sour. Beshar Bhagat's false claim about eating 3 rotlas, and then insisting various disciples to eat more. And Yajnapurush Dashi, he struggles to finish 3 because of his thin frame. But Bhagaji says to eat just half more. And so he did that just to please his guru. Gaining divine bliss, they all anoint and paint and apply sandalwood paste to Bhagaji. And then Bhagaji embraces each sadhu, covering them all with sacred sandalwood paste, creates a divine atmosphere. Bhagaji assigned then each sadhu to each of Vajramut per their inclination. So all the devotees and sadhus read their own respective Vajramut. He emphasized rejecting any pleasure-seeking thoughts. We'll stop there and we'll go over a few topics on B part 2. So faith in God, faith in glory. Faith in God, faith in Dharma, right? Faith in God, faith in Dharma. Faith in Dharma only happens when you have faith in God. And so in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavad, God possesses 39 liberative attributes. If you maintain faith in Dharma alone, faith in God will decline. Panch Vishays can only be conquered by observing the niyams prescribed by God. When you have Vairagya, there is a great effort required to withdraw vrittis from sounds. Ears can still hear, but if the ears are plugged, no sounds can be heard. If you don't touch anything inappropriate, you automatically conquer touch. If you don't look at anything improper, automatically conquer sight. If you have food, you mix it together with water, control the diet. Sense of taste conquered. Block nose when alluring smell. Sense of smell conquered. So in this way, Panch Vishayas can only be conquered by observing niyams. And so that is the only way. Follow niyams prescribed by God. And the way that an ailing person can only be cured by controlling their diet and completing medication, the only way to get cured of these Panch Vishayas is to follow the niyams prescribed by God. One who has strong Shraddha will become enlightened immediately. Someone who has weak Shraddha takes them many lives. Right? If someone were to go to Kashi, takes only 2 steps per day, it takes many days. If they were to do 20 miles per day, it only takes a few days to go to Kashi. Similarly, a person who has strong Shraddha, they get enlightened immediately. People who have less Shraddha, they stay in the abodes of the beautiful realms of the Devs, right? Because they used to look towards God, and God looked toward them, and He was aware of the Vishays that the devotee thought of and had affection for, and so God then sends them to the realm full of Vishays that they had. And so, what are the characteristics of a person who has intense Shraddha? They become very hastily in carrying out their bodily activities when they want to go for engage in activity related to God. If he were to write a letter to change religious vow, they would eagerly comply. If a senior person if a senior person wanted to have a darshan of God, he would become impatient as a child. Person who has little Shraddha, right? A person who has little Shraddha would be acutely attached to the Vishays. A person who has great Shraddha, immediately able to conquer his Indriyas. And the Indriyas are like the wind. We know we can't see the wind, but we know just by how the trees blow that the wind exists. And in the same way, you can't see the vrittis of the Indriyas, but we know that they naturally are inclined to the Panch Vishays. So to force the Indriyas to observe the niyams for renunciance and how the orders prescribed by God. And the way to conquer if someone has weak Shraddha is to realize the glory of God. Earthen versus gold utensils. You know the glory of gold and you know the importance of gold, and so then you know the importance of golden utensils. And so realizing the glory of God will help you increase Shraddha. There is these 2 armies, coward soldiers versus brave soldiers. The coward soldiers, they had thoughts about dying. If they think if our army wins, we will lose our opponent's wealth and weapons. The brave soldiers are not afraid of dying. They do not have any greedy motives to loot. They have one desire and one goal, and that's capture opponent's flag, capture the abode of God, reach the abode of God. They do not care about whether they encounter honor and insults, bodily comforts. They do not care about whatever happens, anything along the way. They care about we only want to attain God in this very lifetime. And so the devotee who identifies himself with the body is the coward. Maharaj went to Ahmedabad to perform the installation ceremony of Sri Narayan. Then he wanted to forget everything. He wanted to forget all of the different thoughts that he had, all the different memories that he had. So he went to Dwarka. He spent the night in there, and he reached Dwarka, and he began to think so much. He began to forget everything about his body. He felt all these different thoughts, and when he looked within, he saw all these different wonders. He saw these wonders of celestial vehicles, maidens, clothes, ornaments, but his mind was not tempted. Right, the Panch Vishays were there, but his mind was not tempted a single bit. And so all the days began to praise him that you are truly are an ekantic bhakt of God because your mind did not become tempted. And so Maharaj was man, I know your true form. If you harbor any thought about God, I will crush you to pieces. So does buddhi chitta hamka. Harbor any form of resolve, contemplate on anything. Harbor any form of conceit other than that of servitude towards God, I will just completely destroy you to pieces. And so only then when Maharaj forgot everything was the illness that arose from those thoughts also disappeared. The Vasudeva Mahatmya says that an ekantic bhakt of God does not believe his body to be his own true form. In the same way that a queen's authority is equal to that of king, the sadhu, who is able to have no affection other than that of God, right? That sadhu possesses as much majesty as God. Person who has obtained a chintamani should look after it with great care in the form of God's form. Maharaj's compassionate nature, a lifeline. Maharaj says that Raghunathji behaved as a Kshatriya, but even if Sitaji, even though she only became subject to only minor public persona, he renounced her immediately. And so Muktanand Swami says that Ramanand Swami's nature was similar as well. Maharaj says that my nature is not like that. I have great compassion, but even though I have great compassion, if a person spites devotees of God, Maharaj has aversion towards those devotees and towards that person. Maharaj does not become easily pleased or displeased over small matters. Maharaj's greatest virtue is that if he is a devotee of that devotee who is a devotee of God. With his bhakti of such devotees, do not perceive flaws in devotee of God. They fall from status of eminence. Progress, regress. Serving devotees of God, spiting devotees of God. One should do only that which pleases God. That is the essence of the Shastras. Maharaj is a desire that he only wishes to serve God and his devotees. This discourse is like after having extracted the essence for all the different Shastras, its most profound and fundamental message. Vow of non-loss, Maharaj's inclination that even if he has a liking for something, he is only happy after discarding it. And his no way does he experience any aversion towards devotees of God. He is insistently offered the Panchvishays without wishing for them, but he constantly does not desire them. He swears by the life of Padamhans that to this day he has never had improper thought about whether a woman in the dreaming state or in the waking state. He is eternally flawless, and one who perceives flaws in Maharaj will suffer from vicious thoughts in the waking and dreaming state. Maharaj is an inner state. Only the contemplation of God remains within his heart, and if he does outwardly meet and mingle, it is only for the benefit of the jeeves. And his best vow is the vow of non-lust. If someone follows the vow of non-lust, they are never far from God. And so Maharaj only likes a service offered by a devotee who is lust-free. It is only because Moji Brahmachari is lust-free does he like his service. And so Maharaj says that in all of the discourse he has delivered, he always propagates the observance of non-lust. Instructed the senior Paramahansa and woman that if any male devotee commits a breach of this observance, to not inform him. And so the three ways that we can remove this lust is to conquer the mind by thinking I'm the Atma in the body. In the same way that if a man conquers the ghost but does not assign the ghost to do work, you should assign the mind to do work in the form of engage in the 9 types of bhakti. To keep the prans under control, diet and activity should be regulated. And if you don't regulate it, then you have an intense yearning for food. Your tongue will hanger after countless tastes of types of taste, and then the other indriyas will not be conquered. They will be unconstrained. Third component is control the body and keep it within the niyam prescribed by God in the satsang. You can do anything with this human body. That which is practiced regularly can definitely be achieved. A sadhu who is eager for liberation will become overjoyed when Maharaj does something that may upset him or denounce the vichay. So when Muktanand Swami has TB, he is restricted from eating all these different tasty foods. And so a wise person will think that I have actually attained the company of a great sadhu in the disguise of TB. And so a person's desires regarding genitals and stomach are characteristics of an unholy person. If a person is staying with a senior sadhu due to temptation of obtaining tasty food or nice drinks, nice clothes, collecting objects he wants, not considered to be a sadhu at all, wretched person and dog, and will follow out a satsanga. If someone gives someone sadhu a nice object, and he becomes greedy for the Panchvishays, and he is jealous, he is much worse than one who has committed the 5 great sins. Eradicate attachment to the Panchvishays, keep the company of a good sadhu, realize the greatness of householders and renunciants. Influence of Rajogun is the cause for disturbance of restlessness even within deep sleep. Even when then 8 factors of place, time, action, company, mantra, shastra, initiation, meditation become unfavorable. They cause adverse influence, even in the great and distress, even in the hearts of Shiv and Brahma. There is no happiness in breaching the disciplines laid by the great Purush. Follow dharma of renunciants, householders, and that of women. And only one who follows the commands of the Satpurush is behaving as the Atma. When Maharaj was a child, he enjoyed going to mandir, discourses, company of sadhus, pilgrimages. But after he renounced his house, he did not like to keep clothes. He did not like to stay in the forest. He only liked to stay in the forest. He was not the least bit afraid of all these different snakes and animals, countless. He did not have any fear of dying. And then only after Ramanand Swami passed away did he keep a little bit of fear, and that was only for that of satsang. He has constant thought of death. He considers all worldly objects that is imperishable and as perishable and insignificant. There is no activity that Maharaj does that is for personal enjoyment. Mind of an ekantic God contemplates upon only the form of God. Mouth sings only the praise of God. If the only son of a king were to die, king would become disinterested. In the same way, Maharaj always constantly remained disinterested. The thought of remaining being the Atma remains within Maharaj's heart. Central principle of all the Shastras, only God and His Son can grant liberation. Do not perceive flaws. In the same way, if wife, son, other family members are immoral, they would not perceive flaws in them. But God possesses every noble virtue. But if he were to utter a few harsh words and one holds a grudge against them, cannot be have said to have affection for that but for God, and does not attain liberation. Nath Bhagat, Vishnu Das, Simrat Shah, Kashidas Damodar, all of these people who had served God and His Son and served them in previous lives. Attributes of a staunch devotee: adherence to niyams, even at the cost of life. Don't forsake them. Have firm faith in God. Even own mind or other people's minds do not influence them. Loyalty to Vaishnava devotees, in the same way parents loyal to children, son loyal to father, wife loyal to husband. Renunciants, despite encountering wealth and women, renunciants remain unaffected. Householders, if we were to give everything they have for something, that is considered the greatest among all devotees. And these respected people of society should be given a seat at the very front of the assembly, because if they do not, dire consequences will happen. They will lead to problems and hindrances in worship. Gaining strength of the Jeev. Jeev is extremely powerful when the vrutis of the Antakaran are vrutis of the Jeev. Jeev is extremely powerful when Jeev doesn't even have impure dreams. Jeev is lacking in strength. Follow the principle of Sankhya and behave as the Atma, not associate with the Indriyas and the Karan. Behaving as the Atma, Jeev gains strength. In the year of 1869, Maharaj of Kailas and Vaikunth saw some riding on Nandeshwar and Garud. He did not have any pleasure. He thought, much better than behaving as the Atma is to stay within the fellowship of God and His devotees. So the best spiritual endeavor is to stay within the fellowship of God and devotees, serve them whichever way possible. When one has darshan of God, all of the miseries are expelled. And one should behave in the same manner as family members do amongst themselves with devotees of God. So if you scold your own family members out of affection, grudges do not develop in their hearts. And so with devotees of God, do not develop a grudge. If you do develop a grudge with God or devotees, Maharaj does not like to look at that person. And one who spites devotees of God can never be redeemed. So the greatest thing to do, no merit greater than serving, and no sin greater than spiting. And so if you want to make your Jeev powerful, serve God and His devotees by thought, word, and deed.